Hi, I'm James McGuire, and today we're talking about data protection in the cloud era, which is a topic that has certainly gotten more complex as the cloud itself has gotten more complicated. To discuss that, I'm joined by Jaspreet Singh, Chief Executive Officer at Druva. Jaspreet, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me here.
And I want to ask you about where you see the data backup and data protection market going. I mean, it certainly has gotten more complicated. I mean, in the old days, there was, say, a data center and a group of employees in cubicles. And, now there's a data center and the employees might be in the cubicles or at home or traveling. Some people are using their phone for work. There might be thumb drives moving in and out of the enterprise. There's a multi-cloud deployment. It's a far more complicated picture. What do you see as some of the key trends in the data backup and data protection market?
It's a great question. So if you look at last 30 years of this market, right, it's a $30 billion market. If you look at last 30 years, it's been a very sticky market, but there are 2 or 3 reasons people actually change their vendor more often than not, right? And actually, surprisingly, all of those reasons are becoming more and more relevant now, right? The number one reason is if they're deploying a whole new set of application. When people deployed Windows, they deployed Seagate software and it became net backup. When they deployed VMware, they started buying a Veeam, a whole bunch more, right? And now they're deploying a whole bunch of cloud applications, right? That's a mega trend.
Right.
Cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, but just more cloud-oriented applications. The second major change reason for change is any massive change in cost scale paradigm shift. So when they first went from direct attached to a network attached, people deployed Veritas net backup and eventually some Commvault, the first generation. Then they went to deploy more disk and dedupe and Avamar and data domain came into picture. And then there was this weird hyperconverged trend in the middle. And now people want the whole paradigm shift to cloud, right? The scale cost paradigm shift is massively different. And I would say the third reason is, which is a sort of a whole different reason, is the whole cybersecurity threat and governance paradigm, right? The changing the landscape of it's pretty huge. So these are 3 reasons, and almost all of them coming together simultaneously of deployment of brand new applications, a massive change in cost and scale paradigm shifts, and then finally a whole new threat vector from cybersecurity and compliance. And people are looking for, how do I not invest into infrastructure to solve this basic fundamental need of an enterprise and look at cloud and SaaS to sort of solve what could be possibly the next generation of architectures.
So you're saying that people in general really want to get away from investing in hardware and infrastructure when it comes to cloud backup, if at all possible.
Because think about it, right? Backup software is a ransomware by itself, right? If you go to an insurance provider tomorrow and say, hey, I want to buy insurance for my house, and insurance provider tells you, I'm going to give you a software which you configure for the next 6 months, but you pay me upfront for 5 years, and I guarantee you nothing in return. That's the story today of backup software, right? You pay upfront for 5 years, you deploy a software and take all the operational responsibility, and the provider guarantees you nothing, right? So, especially in the world of cloud and the world of cybersecurity, this model has to break. This model has to give into more consumption-oriented deployments, more flexibility in terms of what you purchase, what you deploy, a more tighter control of SLAs, a better holistic approach towards solving for ransomware.
It's interesting because I know that Druva uses a software as a service model, and it's hosted on Amazon Web Services where the customer backup data stored in S3. I mean, you've talked about this a little bit, but what do you see as the advantages? And I think the larger question is, will the entire industry move to this model? And if not, why not? Why are some of the laggards not doing this?
I think Druva has a unique model towards building a SaaS platform. It may not be for everyone, right? There are many reasons you may prefer SaaS, you may not prefer SaaS, right? So if the customer's next best architecture approach is to deploy the better or version of infrastructure in their data center, which many reasons it still may make sense. The how invested you as a customer are in data center and how invested you are in infrastructure, and if your next choice is to deploy a better architecture in a data center, SaaS may not be for you. For a lot of customers, they don't want to be in a business of maintaining their backup and recovery architecture, the data resiliency architecture. They truly wants to make data work. And to make data work, they really want to simplify the data operations in general, resiliency, lifetime to be simplified. And they may not want to take the operational burden of managing data consistently and constantly, given all the threat vectors and growth and diversity in data, which is where Druva is very relevant for those customers. And it's a whole different operating model shift and how you used to treat data and how you used to manage data, building and plumbing versus managing to an SLA, to a SaaS service provider. It's very different than the past.
Is there a sense that some companies are nervous in terms of compliance issues? We can't use the software as a service model because there's some things we can't let out of house, or there's a corporation that has, the corporate secret, so to speak, their proprietary information. We can't use the SaaS model because of that. Is that something holding it back?
I think security used to be a 2018 issue, but not anymore for cloud. I think we have more and more seen that security, if you look at all the ransomware attacks, they have been on the company's core infrastructure and very little so for cloud vendors so far. So the corporate infrastructures are somewhat more prone to security threats. Security used to be an issue or used to be a concern for enterprises, but not anymore. And actually, matter of fact, if you deploy a backup software on your network or on your infrastructure, which is prone to ransomware, then you aren't actually building a good, robust recovery plan, because it's like, putting the insurance software in the house, you're insuring itself. So if your network or infrastructure does get compromised, the air gapping of data doesn't really help because the application is running on your network, which got compromised.
Right.
So in many, many ways, building an operational separation, building a data separation to make sure my data or my backups and DR copies are into a different location altogether, managed by a different set of teams operationally, and delivered to me as a service, creates that really, really good air gapping from service overall, not just data, which is very, very relevant in today. So security, in fact, is actually a big driver for people to look at SaaS than in the past.
Interesting. Just for my own education, I've always wondered, and I guess, being as close to the security market as you are, you may be able to answer this. Like, if a company is properly set up to avoid ransomware, can they avoid it? I mean, I don't understand why, they're approached with a ransomware request and they can't say, oh, no, we've got our data tucked away somewhere that you can't get, so we're going to ignore you, and we're just going to simply move the backup into place and go right on and doing our business. Is that not technically possible?
Great question. So let me give an example, a real story without naming the customer, what happened, right? Security is a layered approach to security, right? You may have the best protection, but you still need incident response and security operations to make sure the protection is well managed. And you still need a robust recovery mechanism in case the layer above you got breached. So you need all three. You need protection, you need security operations and incident response, and you also need a good, robust recovery, right? So a customer, we saw a customer over Thanksgiving weekend, true story, with their data reduction, the data being reduced and being deleted, right? So we tried to give them a call. We couldn't get an answer, long weekend. We looked at the statistics and saw that they've been reducing the data for the last a few weeks, and they had renewed with us 2 weeks prior, and they had done some reduction and not doing a major reduction. For once, we thought maybe they're just right sizing, right? But then we again gave them a call and didn't hear anything. So we dropped them an email. We got a response back saying, don't worry about it. It's being right-sized for the department.
Okay.
Something didn't gel. So our support engineer did not drop the data. We have an air gapping mechanism where if the customer deletes data, unless we verify, we don't delete data.
Right.
So it sits in a recycle box of sorts. After Thanksgiving, I think on Sunday, we again give them a call saying, is everything okay? And the person responded saying, don't worry about it. We spoke last Friday. Everything is fine. Go ahead, delete data. Okay. But something still didn't match appropriately. We again called them up on Tuesday and found out the person we were speaking with all the while was the hacker itself.
Oh,
so the hacker
really?
came in.
Wow.
The hacker came in. The first thing they did was they compromised the email system over a long weekend, then the phone system.
Really?
So two-factor
Wow.
authentication was broken. Then they
Oh.
created accounts for themselves and then impacted the backups before they could go and delete data. So
Okay.
if this was only a protection challenge, because multiple systems got breached, very, very hard to defend. If it was only a backup software, the software had no visibility, operational visibility into what was happening. With our approach, we could actually authenticate the user, build appropriate air gap between application, operations, data with the customer, and then safeguard the data against a massive issue.
So you're saying there is a setup under which ransomware can be protected against, and I guess there's this hypothetical future where all companies would have figured that out. Is it possible that someday ransomware will go away because of that?
I doubt it. I think there's a constant game between. I wish, but I think it's a constant game between security, external hackers and internal engineers constantly battling out. I think all we can do is to prepare against internal, external security threat with a layered model to make sure we're prepared for the day it happens.
So I'd like to get your advice that you might give to customers. I'm assuming that you see some problems crop up again and again with either your customers or out in the market and sort of the standard issue headaches. I mean, is there any advice that you give to customers in the data protection backup market? Like, make sure you do this, or certainly be thinking about this to optimize the effectiveness?
I think may biased here again, but I think the backup is a means to an end. The end being, the business be able to safeguard data and be able to make it productive. So I think some things enterprise could do makes a lot of sense. And making sure to get the vendor who can uphold the SLAs they really want for the business. B, build a holistic model. Traditionally, data protection or backup was built around recovery of a service against a human error, but now security being a big concern, making sure they deploy a very integrated stack that their data protection can actually communicate with security and incident response, so the whole stack can work appropriately together for holistic response for recovery. And number three, I would say is that traditionally backups or data protection has been a graveyard for data. You throw them in an appliance and you forget about them. But it's a really good heterogeneous set of data for across the enterprise, and how you may wish to leverage it for actually delivering your outcome which you really wanted for your business to drive meaningful insights and actionable areas of growth. It's truly powerful. So think about data protection as not just insurance, but in future looking ways to actually power what your business outcomes are.
Well, it's speaking of the future. Say we look, 5 years from now, and we're very much living in a multi-cloud world with data exception distributed. Data is all over the place. What do you see when you look into the future of data protection and backup, and how can companies get ready for that now?
I think data protection and backup 5 years out, if I have to be a try to understand the world out there. Number one, I think you will see a world where the developers trying to create rapid applications.
Rapid applications.
They wouldn't wait for IT to provide them infrastructure. The whole infra as a code, which is the whole developer movement, will be full-fledged in motion, if not already, like in 5 years.
Right.
People will want to understand data holistically, not just for protection or BI or data lakes. I think this whole notion of data lakes and backups and data protection may start to blur and merge. If you have a holistic approach to protect and manage data, you may still need those ultimate warehouses, but the whole concept of data lake and backups, in my mind, will start to blur.
Where what would happen to them if they're blurring? That means it becomes one entity? Or what do you mean by that?
I think they do. In the ideal world, you don't need a data lake. In an ideal world, once you have a robust mechanism to actually store and protect data, all you're doing is creating a ETL pipe to a warehouse, right? So
Okay.
a multi-protocol stack sitting on a backup is not further behind than a warehouse. Sorry, further behind than a data lake. Data lake tends to be a dumping ground for a lot of unstructured data or structured data in many ways. So a decently good multi-protocol stack which can connect a backup to a warehouse eliminates the need of a lake altogether in many cases, because people are solving this problem in many different ways. They're trying to build a long-term retention in Snowflake. They're trying to understand Hadoop on backups. This two sets of arguments around BI systems and warehouses and backup systems need to come more closer together, and which almost removes the need for a lake in my mind.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, you made mention of Snowflake. It seems like in the world of data, the word Snowflake always comes up. I mean, do you interoperate with them, or what is your sense of Snowflake vis-a-vis your model these days?
I think not today, but I do see a world where these two models have to. Data warehouses and Snowflake obviously done a brilliantly great job. In the scheme of things, the data warehouses, have less than 1% of enterprise data, right?
Is that
They do
true?
depend
Okay,
upon an entire supply chain of data. In matter of fact, right? The warehouses depend on a supply chain of data coming from multiple pipes, be it directly from applications or from a lake or a pre-processing of sorts. So in the world in 5 years, or as you asked, data is a lot more automated, a lot more codified for developers, and a lot more integrated with applications of future like security, like BI.
Interesting. Jaspreet, I think you said it. It's going to be fascinating to watch the market, to be sure. Appreciate you sharing expertise. I definitely learned something. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. A pleasure.